Well, Bank of America is at it again, but this time former employees are pointing out abuse. 7 former employees and a former contractor submitted sworn affidavits to a civil lawsuit claiming that Bank of America purposely stalled, delayed, or denied home loan modifications. They even enforced foreclosure quotas on employees and handed out bonuses to the people with the highest foreclosure rate. These fraud allegations were broken down in a Salon article written by David Dayan. Here's how the modification worked. Borrowers were supposed to make 3 trial payments before the loan modification became permanent. In actuality, many borrowers would make payments for a year or more, only to find themselves rejected for a permanent modification, and then owing the difference between the trial modification and their original payment, causing many families to be foreclosed on. And the accusations go on. So will Bank of America face consequences for lying to its customers, as these whistleblowers say it has been doing? Or is it Bank of America too big to actually face any criminal charges at all? Here to help me break this all down is Richard Eskow. He's a senior fellow at the Campaign for America's Future. Hi there, Richard. Now, before we get into all the nitty-gritty details that I just talked about, let's start off by explaining to the audience how some home loan modifications are supposed to work.
Well, basically, the way it's supposed to work is that the president's program, the HAMP program, we were told would give people a chance to modify their mortgages to an affordable rate, because a lot of people who can't pay their mortgages, who are out of work, whose homes are underwater so they can't sell them, they're paying much higher interest rates than the rest of the country because they can't refinance. So it was supposed to help them bridge to getting a better and more reasonable loan. But what banks have done over and over, the administration decided to let the banks police themselves in how they handled this program, and what we saw was a massive wave of fraud and criminality, what they called extend and pretend, where the banks would stretch out these discussions of the modifications. People would continue to pay, the banks would collect another year's worth of mortgage money or so, and then foreclose anyway. So the cruelest kind of deception. This was supposed to be ended with the foreclosure settlement the administration spearheaded last year, along with most of the states of the country. But as these revelations show us, the banks didn't even slow down. At least Bank of America continued to defraud its customers with this lying pattern, this customer fraud known as extend and pretend.
And obviously we're learning a lot more about this fraud from these whistleblowers, but you're saying that Bank of America probably isn't alone in this practice. Do I have you correct?
I would be astonished if it were. These practices were endemic across the industry. Banks watch one another, and if one bank is cheating and lying and getting away with it, I would almost be certain that the others are, many of the others are as well.
Do we have any sense of how many people were affected by this loan modification process?
Well, in terms of Bank of America, it's not clear, but we know that many, many people have been dragged into this extend and pretend process, as we call it. I wrote a piece years ago about it and was just inundated with emails by people saying I thought I was the only one. We didn't get a full investigation because one of the other problems with the settlement deal last year is that it ended the ongoing investigation, so we don't have the full numbers, but we know that it was massive and widespread fraud.
Now, at the same time, Richard, last year Bank of America was part of a $25 billion settlement for wrongful foreclosures. Do these new accusations fall under that? I mean, is Bank of America essentially free from liability in this instance?
Well, no, because according to these revelations, some of these fraudulent activities took place after the settlement, which should, if we had, which we don't, an aggressive administration and Justice Department, that should invalidate the settlement and leave Bank of America open to prosecution, to further suits for fraud. But of course, we're seeing none of that because the pattern has been not to pursue banks. But no, the fact that some of these revelations involve activity after the settlement was signed suggests that if our government wanted to, it could go after Bank of America big time.
Let's step away from the banks for a moment, Richard, and let's talk now about non-bank servicers that BOA, Bank of America, and others were working with to sell millions of mortgages. Companies like NationStar, Oswin, and Greentree. As I understand it, these companies are not subject to a lot of the guidelines that the government set up after these foreclosure crises. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that's important and what these companies have been up to as of late?
Well, there have been patterns of abuse that involve banks, for example, stretching a negotiation out with a struggling homeowner and collecting large sums of money while these various mortgage service organizations continue to collect and administer the mortgage. Then they'll switch servicers, and the new servicer will, quote unquote, have different rules, and they will say, well, those negotiations don't apply now that we're stepping in and handling this mortgage. And when that happens, you see these homeowners basically being told everything you've been paying for and negotiating for the last year, 18 months, whatever it is, doesn't count anymore, and we're starting from scratch. And that's often being used as an excuse to foreclose.
Yes or no, will we ever see bank executives fired as a result of this?
Not unless people march in the street demanding it, because we don't have a government that wants to do it. Neither political party has shown a spine for it.
Thank you so much. Richard Eskow, Senior Fellow at the Campaign for America's Future.
Well, there you have it. Not unless people get out onto the street and start screaming about it. We have a criminal country. Every institution is practicing criminal acts, committing criminal acts. Two things that I want to say about this broadcast. One, to show the mansions, before they showed the Federal Reserve, they showed these huge houses. I thought that was very interesting. Most of the people who are victims of this bank fraud don't have mansions. Most of these people have very modest homes that they're losing because of these criminal banks. And I'm tired of hearing this too big to jail. Are you kidding? No one is too big to be held accountable for their criminal acts. They're allowed to commit these criminal acts because we don't hold them accountable, because we have a Justice Department that is not about justice. We have a presidency and an executive office that is not about justice, is not about helping the people out. All of these programs that Obama instituted to help these people, save their homes, was a huge failure. Already headlines in 2010. Failed. HAMP. Failed. Big failure. Colossal failure. I have videos of this failure. People are still losing their homes because of crimes being committed, and they're not putting them away. Obama is not only being aggressive about this. He doesn't do anything about it because the banks rule. Tired of it, folks.